right. When you're, I want to boy. Gentlemen, how you guys doing? How you guys doing? Mr. Sapalucia.
No,
I don't want to talk to anything about Liberia. So I'll talk to Mr. Sapalucia.
You see, I'm answering both of you. You see how multi-dialected I am, you know?
All right, folks, welcome to Liberia Shall Rise. I'm your favorite person, Mr. Augustine Sharif. I don't know about Dr. Positive, but again, I follow the second favorite person on this platform, Mr. Sapalucia. Guys here, gentlemen, we will have a great discussion. You know, today is table talk. I love our table talk Sundays because table talk, we get to pour our mouth everywhere we want to put it. Whether we want to touch politics, we'll touch it. We want to talk about Facebook etiquette, we'll touch it. But today, we're talking about something that most of you guys don't know nothing about. Dr. Positive, you know nothing about the Poro and Sande Society in Liberia. And so, Mr. Sapalucia, I salute this brother. So he's the most educated one here so far when it comes to that society. But we'll talk. I know he can't tell us everything because what happened in Vegas, stay in Vegas. But we're going to try to play around with it and deal with this topic. And we're going to bring our doctor himself on, Dr. George. He is going to be giving us some background when it comes to the educational perspective of this, the Western perspective. So we are going to be touching that subject today, guys. So just get your seatbelt on and let's pour out more somewhere we're not supposed to put it. Dr. Positive, how was Dallas?
Dallas is good. Dallas is good. Yesterday, my pastor celebrated 20 years of marriage, brother.
Man.
20 years of marriage. And I was opportune to be the MC. So I was given the opportunity to preach to my pastors and things. So I did a sermon yesterday on when a man finds something, he finds a good thing. When a man finds a wife, he finds favor in the Lord. So sermon was the most powerful sermon in the air, though. You can go and ask people to tell you. Man.
I'm not going to ask anyone. I'll look for it on YouTube. If I can't find it on YouTube, we'll look.
This guy is controversial.
Dr. George, I know you're busy, but I want to hear your radio voice. Dr. George, how you doing? Unmute yourself and say hello.
Oh, I'm doing very fine. Good evening to all those who are listening to us on Facebook, YouTube, and wherever you are listening. It's good to hear from every one of you guys.
All right.
Same here.
All right. So, gentlemen, we are going to be talking about beautiful institutions in Liberia that maybe, I don't know if it is still as strong as I knew it when I was a little kid. You know, so we're going to be talking about some of those beautiful institutions, the benefits, and some of the things we saw that our sisters or brothers who actually were fortunate to enter those secret closets, we are going to see some of the benefit that at least we're able to see. And so I will go ahead and play our song, you know, our theme song. And once that song is playing, we want to invite everyone, just continue to share the broadcast. And we will come back and we will get right into the meat of our table talk today, which is going to be a discussion on the Sande and Poro Society. Stay tuned, friends, and we will be right back.
Liberia,
welcome back to Liberia Rise. I'm your host, Augustine Sharif, and I'm here with Mr. Emmanuel Sapolucia, my brother from Bunk County. And Dr. Positive is hiding somewhere in the back. He'll be joining us here shortly, and Mr. George is going to be joining us as well. So, Mr. Sapolucia, let's get the show on the road. Let's get it going. And if you are just joining us today, we just having fun today. Today is Table Talk Sunday. So we are going to be talking about some things that most of you probably knew about when you were in Liberia, or maybe you are fortunate to be part of this particular group of special people we are going to be talking about. Mr. Sapulisa, let me start with you. I don't know. Again, I want to be very clear here. I'm not expert on the subject matter, and I would just speak from experience. And I am not even 100% if in Liberia, does every tribe in Liberia or every group in Liberia, do they have their own version of the Sande and Poro Society, or is it just one Sande and Poro Society and everybody just go with the same rules?
Well, everybody has. Well, anyway, first of all, let me say hi and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you find yourself. I want to say thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for this discussion. And the Poro and Sande Society, I experience it, and I know I may not be the expert, but I'm speaking based on experience, the benefit and things that I know about. And I think, and just from what I can, tell us or educate us on is that I think it's something that we should not, in my opinion, as a member of it, we should not keep as secret. I think just that we can go about the Bible in public, we should be putting this out there so that those that are members and those who are not members can know the benefit of it. And if there are some disadvantages, if we can improve those things that we can improve or symbolize them, then it will be better than to keep it as a secret. And then we lost, and in fact, we have lost the value of those particular practices that were part of the Poro and the Sande Society. So I think that is something we need to also use. It should be as education that we should make public, in my opinion, because I think it had a lot of benefit. I know some of the values are kind of disappearing because it no longer, as things develop, is no longer essential to the growth of the community. But I think it should still be, we should still kind of put it out there, and let's see how generation after generation, how we can improve it or make it better to benefit and work, to be used in the society that we live in. So I think it's still a good society, but I think it's losing its value because it was kept secret for a long time.
So you see, and again, I mean, I know Mr. Josh is still trying to get on here, but I just got to go back and just tell you, I grew up, spent a lot of my early years in Grand Bassa. And, I know the Bassa people, they did it very big, and I was very fortunate to also live in the village. I always say on this platform, I am a village boy. I'm proud of it. I left my village school at one point in time, came to Buchanan, and then later on come to Monrovia. We went to Monrovia. But in the village, it was a special occasion, special moments when those girls were graduating. I'm just using graduation because that's what I thought was happening. Mm-hmm. When those girls were graduating, coming out of the bush, coming to town, it was a big feast. It was a big deal. And people made it a very big occasion. And those were moments. But I can tell you, as a kid, as a young person, I was afraid of that. My mom, my parent never got me into it. But all I heard was stories, like what happened behind there, which of course we're not going to throw out here, but we're going to touch on some of the benefits, because as I grew up, I started to learn about some of these things, whether it was in school or whether we started doing our own research. I learned about some of these things. But I knew for a fact that it was a special class, because in Buchanan, in Grand Bassa County, in number 4 district, when those girls graduated, they came out, they were set aside. Now they could commune with the women in the town. They were no longer little girls playing hopscotch or kakalika. They were now preparing, they were getting into adulthood, they were getting ready for marriage, and they were in a special class. And so that's what I know. But the other horror story, the other things I heard, we might touch some of them, but I don't think we'll go a little bit deeper. But talking from a boy perspective or guy perspective, what were some of those benefits that someone who entered that particular, I don't want to keep using the word society because society just sounds.
School. I want to call it a traditional, either Liberian traditional school. That's how I want to refer to it.
I would go with that. So, what were some of those benefits that a young guy or young boy who entered into that particular school coming out? What were some of those things that he was most likely to gain and be able to practicalize when he came out?
So, and let me go back to what I said earlier when it comes to changing or modifying it as time changes, right? Mm-hmm. So the benefit back then, let's take the 60s, the 70s, most of Liberia, especially the Bonkandi, the Nimai, the Bassa, and other places, the Kidman, they were cut off almost from Monrovia, right? Mm-hmm. So most young men and women were more helpful to their parents when it comes to farming and things of that nature. And that's the most things the school did, right? I know, yes, it has some negative, in which is in every schools or whatever you want to, any organization, everyone has some kind of cons, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, they do have those cons. But what it did was it trained young men on farming, fishing, hunting, and most of the crafts you see, that was most of our crafts that we put on the market, whether it is a mask or a statue, most of those things, there where they were learning those things. If you were good at, let's say, making masks, you will learn how to do it more. The basket that you see our women weaving, that's where they were learning, and the fishing net, they were learning those things there. Even building thatch houses, because let us not forget, back in the days, we did not have zincs, right? So young men were learning how to put thatches on the roof of the house to build for their families. So it was mainly a school where you go to learn about becoming a man, your responsibility to your family, your responsibility to your personal family. That when I say family, that is your father, wife, and kids. Your responsibility to your father, your parent, your responsibility to your quarter. Because for us, let's say when I was from one country, from Baila, right, my town, we are divided into quarters. So and my name Kemun is a name that is given to a warrior, right? So yes, I was much younger when I became part of it, but that name comes from my quarter. So that particular name, it represents the statue in that quarter. So I represent not just my family anymore. The name Kemun Bear it comes from a quarter, and I represent a quarter. Yes, so it has more values than people think about it. So I'm being trained or being educated to take care of me personally, to take care of my future wife and children, to take care of my parents, to take care of my quarter. Okay, I have our own responsibility to my quarter to take care of the older people, to serve them in other capacity, whether I'm going to be the quarter chief, whether I'm going to be the quarter security guy or the town crier, whatever responsibility I'm going to be giving my quarter, that is my role. Okay, and the names, they got various names that will give you from the quarter that will represent different things, right? So those are things out there, and there were other people too who were good at herbalists. So that person was trained to cure diseases. Okay, like I remember my dad was good at giving poison, snake poison out of people. That's just something he was trained at. He knew what leaves to use to draw the poison out of the person when the snake bite them. So there were so many things that were taught over there that get overshadowed by some less than 1% of what goes on there, right? Less than 1% of what goes on there overshadows all the values that comes from within the school. One of the most important things that have now lost value in our home is respect. Respect was one of the paramount things that were taught in that school. Even if I'm older than you by a day, as long you are older than me, I will respect you. If you talk to me, I'm just going to sit and listen. I don't talk back. But it's gone. It has declined in our society. So I mean, look, there was so much value, and that is why I said initially that I will wish that we wouldn't have kept those secret and put it on the outside. But I think it became a secret when the Western culture started infiltrating our countries, and they try to overshadow some of those things. And I think it put fear in our people, and they put it, as a secret where you cannot talk about it anymore. On the outside, you just keep it to yourself. But I think it had it had more value to present to our country than the minute things that the worst thing people put out there that make it seem so horrible.
Okay. Oh man, thank you so much. I mean, Sapalucia, I mean, this is an education for me personally, because that's why I was really excited for us to discuss this. I had little brothers that were fortunate to actually enter the school, but I never got to experience that. And when they came out, I felt so left out because when they came out, it was just like they belonged to the echelon of people and they could not talk to me,
Yeah.
right? They could not talk to me. And so it just, I mean, matter of fact, at some point in time, it got to a point where my little brothers, they would tell me, they say, you guys have been brainwashed by Western education, right?
Mm.
And so, you don't belong to this particular group. And they will not tell you, some of the things that we know. So I would try to Westernize it and say, well, we learned about the Poro and Sande Societies school in school. And my little brother would say, hey, we go to the same school. We go to the same school together. What you learning over there is not what we did there, And so this is good education. And I want to bring Mr. George in because I think he's kind of struggling with his phone. He's outdoor today. So, Mr. George, if you can hear me, I'm going to bring you in. I want to hear your perspective on this particular subject, so we can give Mr. Sapalucia a break to go get his cassava gravy. Mr. George, let me hear from you. What's your take on this particular subject matter?
If you're hearing me, my take is very simple. If you check all the countries in West Africa, Liberia, and to some extent, Sierra Leone, are two countries that really struggle with identity problems. And the reason we struggle with the identity problem because we don't know whether we left or we right. We don't know whether we are Western or we are Africans. So we have a whole nation that is suffering from that. And hopefully we'll have this kind of discussion so that at least we can try to find an identity. Why do I say this? Growing up as I was in Liberia in the 70s and the 80s, you realize that people were more interested in Western civilization, Western education. To some extent, the United States of America became the best school of thought for our people and our culture. So we struggle with this because when colonization, slavery took place, they went to the heart of African educational system. Because in the African educational system, almost like the Western educational system in the 1800s and the 1900s, boys and girls started school from home. And as they grow older, they were allowed, if you come to the Western civilization, the European civilization, as you came older, you were allowed, if you came from a wealthy family, you were allowed to do travel around the world. Once you come from a long travel around the world and came back to Europe, you were seen as a brilliant person. That's why you see Charles Darwin, Turing. He did it when he was not in Europe. He was on one of those educational travel trips when he brought up all this theory of evolution. So in the African society, young boys and young girls study first at the feet of their dad and their mom home. And at the time you turn the age of 12, 13, you went into what as I wrote in some of the papers I have written called the Liberian bush schools. You went either, if you are a girl, you went to the Sandy bush school. If you are a boy, you went to the Poro bush school. And in that school, the educational system was you were trained in order for you to, as Mr. Sapalucia said, for you to come back into your community, and you were trained the skills you needed that was very important to your community, to your society. And I'm grateful Mr. Sapalucia, who had been in the school, was able to share that you were trained to become a carpenter. That means building homes. You were trained to be a support system. Because in most villages in Liberia, in my grandmother's village, the Siklat town in Bombing County, the young boys, they help each other. They move from homes to homes. If one person was building a house before he got married, all those young boys who have come, who graduated at the same time, the same year from the Poro Society, went to help that person to build their homes, build a house, and the community came together to support that. But unfortunately, we had this Western education, which first of all started to have problems of first religion. And it's a book I'm working on right now. Hopefully, I'll be able to complete it. One of the negative things was religion. When it came to Africa, they started to call the teachers who came out of the school and some of the members of the school who came in the form of.
Oh man.
You know, well, he'll come back on. He is outdoors, so we'll have him come in. But Sabalusi, I think he's right in line. While we wait for Mr. George, let's bring Dr. Positive in.
He's back.
Maybe he's back. Let him just end his point.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, him as masquerade, we begin to call them devil.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how can you call a cultural or mentor or a cultural how they call it, a sensitive part of the African culture? We turn and call it devil because they wanted to give the religious people wanted to give a negative connotation. We started to talk about juju. We anything that took place in that society became negative. It became like people went there to learn how to kill and damage one another. And because of that, many of us, including you and I, Mr. Sheriff, and also Dr. Positive, you and I refused to enter the school because we thought it was negative. And there are thousands of Liberians who have not entered the Bush school because they also thought it was negative. And in recent time, the biggest thing after they have found out that it could not.
Well, to my point, it was my dad who thought it was negative.
Exactly. So he thought it was negative, and you also thought it was negative. But but in recent times, the second fight against the school, which I mean, every educational system, whether it's in Western college or in Western university, have a negative part of it. They have things that are negative. And I think one of the biggest thing, by the time you talk about the Bush school, people run to either the issue of using juju in a Bush school, or people run to the genital mutilation amongst the females. But that, as Sapalusu say, is just about 1%, less than 1% of the activities that take place within our school. We can sit with the teachers of those institutions, of that institution, and say, well, the world have advanced. We are saying that this is so negative. Let us try to take it out of the school instead of us throwing everything away. So again, I will conclude by this because I know we have long time. Other people have points to make. One of the
Okay, so you conclude. So, Mr. Pastor, let me bring you in. Because you don't know. I will say to you, you know nothing about it here. You know nothing about it.
I know single Joba or whatever he was.
You don't know nothing about it, but I will let you make your point.
Let Dr. George
point so they make a point.
So one of the things that have affected us in Liberia, and we need to work on it so hard, is the identity crisis. And it's one of the reasons, as negative as the Liberian Civil War was, one of the biggest impact the Civil War have made on our country is the renewal of the acceptance of our African and our Liberian cultural identity.
Yes.
Okay, I will be coming back to you and Mr. Sabalusia, but I want to hear Mr. Positive. I don't know if you get any fish to fry.
Stop right there. Okay, let me disappoint you, right? So my mother is Bassa, right? My father is Kpeliye'e. So I grew up with my mother because my father passed away at a very early age. So with that said, when the war came, Sheriff, you'll be very disappointed. I went to the rural area, right? And I love the Poro Society. I love the Sande Society for a few reasons, right? When we went to the interior, even though I wasn't fortunate to become a member, during the war, they still had children that were still in school, right? So these girls would disappear during the day. We don't see them for a few days and weeks, and then you just see them show up in the town, right? And I mean, their outfit was amazing. That I love. As young as I was, I love the outfit. I won't explain. You can start laughing. So scratching your head. But as young as I was 11, 12, I love their outfit, right? Then the kid that were part of that, the ones that have graduated, there was this kid that graduated from that school. He was like, they used to call us something like Toto, right? In Basa, they call it Kua, right? That means you are Bele. You
I'm
not, you know,
I'm impressed. No, Steve, I'm impressed. So
you
far.
see,
Keep
no,
going, keep going.
yeah. So these kids will teach you how to set trap, right? They will teach you how to make fun. They'll teach you how to even cut grass. You understand? So these were skills that these kids had. I mean, that came from the city at 12 years old at that time. This kid at the same age had skills that I knew nothing about. And with my education, my Western education, I felt like nothing. Like you're saying, you were right in that point, because when I went there, I felt like I was lacking so many things. These kids could swim, right? In the rural area, this kid could go under the water and bring fish out, right? And do things that were amazing. I was like, wow, how did it do it? But I believe some of those training were acquired in the school, in the traditional school. So it's a sad thing that I missed that opportunity. And as I was reading on this thing, my question to Sapolosia is, how education age doesn't expire. How old can I be to enroll in this program? I would still like to acquire some of the training, because these are skills that are supposed to be passed down from generation to generation. Sadly, for some of us, we weren't opportune to get in there. So if I were to ask you one question, is it too late for Sharif to get in? Is it too late for me to get in? Because I think if those of us that already have the Western education, if we go in, then we can be the catalyst for change, for the change that you are advocating, because we would see something different and maybe advise those that are in leadership and say, hey, maybe if we add this or subtract this, it will make the society better for everybody to be part of it. And I think one thing I will conclude with is our culture is something that our ancestors held deeply, and those are some of the secrets that they hold and they are willing to share to the generation to come. And the fact that it's not embedded into our educational system is something that our whole society is lacking. And I believe if Liberia, if any African country have to stand on its own, we have to uphold our culture, and that would make us to have some value, because we cannot adapt the Western culture and make it our own.
Sapolosia, I tell the man he's too old to join. But go ahead, sir.
Well, fortunately for him, no, he's not, because to put it practically, remember in the 1980s, I think 85, 86, when Dole went to Bonkante and he was trying to access certain area, and he was told that he cannot access that area unless he become a member of the Polar Society, which he did. Okay, so you're never too old to become part of the Polar Society.
Thank you, Sapolosia. Shall we get on me today?
However, though, you may not withstand some of the things that they go through, because it requires. That's why it is good to join when you are young.
While you are young,
yeah, because it requires some heavy lifting.
But Sapolosia, this is why I want to. You were there, but yeah, the dual example was a great one. That was a great example. But when you're young and you go into those institutions, you're learning all of those beautiful skills, how to take care of the wife, the children, all of that. This man is already ahead of the game. He already established.
Well, but that one makes it better. He's not going there to relearn how to take care of his family. He's going to learn the cultural value that he can pass on to his children.
Got it.
Yes, and Dr. George stressed a point that I really appreciate. I remember growing up in Liberia, you could not find Liberians with African attires. We felt that our clothes were not worth wearing. We would prefer going down waterside to buy old ratty dugafle and wear it than to buy a lapa and sew a lapa suit. I remember during the 90s, I found myself looking for African tie-dye, those bazan, they call it bazan. Looking, because I started admiring it, especially when I saw the Nigerians wearing their African clothes and saw how it was looking good on them. So I used to save money, go and buy my bazan, and sew it, right? And I remember buying one. I saw it, and when I brought it home, my dad came from the interior. He saw it, he liked it, he took it. It got me angry, but I felt proud that my father took it with me, right? Because and I started appreciating. And since I came to America to afford money, I've always made sure. The only time I try not to wear African clothes to go to church or go out is when it's very cold, because our clothes are not meant to be worn in winter, right?
Mhm.
I appreciate wearing African attire everywhere I go. That is one thing the war brought to us. However, the war also destroyed uh, our society. It made the situation worse because some of those sacred places that we had, people who were not supposed to go there, they went there and they destroyed things that they're not supposed to destroy. Right? So that was the negative it had in that. And then some of our people who had the brain, they were killed by these guys who knew nothing about what was going on. In my hometown, we lost a lot of what we call Zoe. And you know, when Dr. George talks about the connotation, the wording, these are codes that the Western world use on our values, right? And I know Dr. Joy, who's a historian, and I think Sherry, you back in that era. If you look at the words that they try to use on us, traps, devil, those words are codes that they use to make us look bad. Juju, witchcraft. I did not know witchcraft was a religion until I came to the United States. Witchcraft that was made to look like the worst thing in the world, it is a religion in the United States. Witchcraft. And it's practiced not by black people. It is practiced by white people in Pennsylvania, in Kentucky, in West Virginia. They practice witchcraft. It is a religion. So the wordings that they put in our ears, it made us to reject what we loved. Like altar. They made us feel that when we built altar, that they built in a church, ours was negative and theirs were good. When we took in our tradition, we took our first food to either our river or Bokobo Hill or wherever we found that was sacred. They told us it was worshiping false God. But then they built a church and they built an altar and they tell us bring your first fruit at the altar. You know, the same word, different position, but when one person does it, it's horrible, and the other person does it, is better. Those are things we have to fight to identify ourselves or who we are, and then maybe we'll correct some of those mistakes that we made. But I think the Poro and Sande Society is a very good institution that needs to be re-established, and if possible, we need to start telling our story. And I think that's the reason why it's lost in translation, because we are allowing, or we allow the Westerners to tell us what the Poro Society is, instead of our people who were teaching these things telling us what it is.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Liberia Shall Rise, and today we are discussing Table Talk. It's Table Talk Sunday, and we are discussing the Poro and Sande Society, the beautiful school of thoughts, that beautiful institution that you can find in Liberia, Sierra Leone, West Africa, and most of the Guinea. You can find those schools in most of those West African countries. So we're going to take a quick musical break. And when we come back, we will look at this particular school in detail. And we'll give Mr. Sapalucia time to get some water, because when he talked about this last segment, he was ready to fire up. And I like the analogy that he made about the fresh fruit to the altar versus the fresh fruit to the Bokobo Hill. We'll take a quick 30 seconds break, and we will come back and we'll discuss this more. And when we come back, we'll have a number. If you are fortunate to be part of that school, there's going to be a number on the screen that you can call to share your opinion. Or in the meantime, you can also do that on Facebook as well. Whoa, 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 whoa. Love is all we need to make it see. This is the time to come together. Keep Liberia safe forever. So open up your heart and let the unity begin. Love is all we need to make it stand. Let's cultivate one another. Learn to live together as brothers and sisters.
of togetherness, we won't have a peace.
All right, welcome back to Table Talk Sunday, and we are discussing the Poro and Sande Society, those beautiful institutions that we are slowly losing if we have not already lost those institutions. And we are joined today by Mr. Sapalucia, who is a graduate of that institution. And we will have a number here that you can call if you are a member of that institution. Some of the benefits you got from that institution, please feel free, call us, or join us on Facebook and send us your comment and be part of the discussion today as well. Mr. Sapalucia, let me come to you, and then the same question goes to Mr. George. Mr. George as well. I don't know much about the Freemasons, but I just want to put it out there. I know there are some identity, right, that they have. When you meet another friend who is part of that organization, you are able to identify them either by handshake or either by the insignia, whatever they wear on their clothes, the logo that they carry. And there are some identifying things that you can look at and say, oh, that person graduated from there. And when you go to Liberia, I know there are some tribes in Liberia where our young women or young men, they will have a mark. Like if you have a Gisi or someone who a Kisi, I believe, a Loma, they carry a mark, or someone from Bon County, they carry a mark. Someone from Nimba County, they have some mark on their back that just kind of show like this. Now, is there any identifying figure that when Sapalucia meets Sharif, he can just give to Sharif to know that, yes, Sharif was part of this particular organization, he knows what he's talking about, or it is just simply by asking?
Well, so and some of these have lost in translation. So a while back, there were certain names, especially among the Pele and the Loma, that I don't know about the other group, but the Pele and the Loma, there were certain names that were not just given to people, right? So, for example, when I was born, I was given Emmanuel. So the Kemu name I got after I graduated from the school. Anybody who hears the name Kemu, they will know, especially from the Pele and the Loma, Yakpawolo, Kwalpa, and some of the Koli, and some of those names, right? Once you become part of the school and graduate, you are given a certain name. And those names identify you knowing that you went through the school and came out. However, as time went by, people just started giving these names after their namesake, right? So I think that's one of the values that have lost. However, we have marks, but the person will have to maybe take out their clothes or whatever. But you can easily see some of the mark on the back of the neck, especially for the Pele and the Loma, right? Because there are some marks on your skin that whether you take out your shirt, somebody will know, oh, I know this guy. He and I went through the same thing. And then what I do know also is, for example, if you went in a town and they call for what they now call the devil, right? But we call it the masquerade. If our masquerade was to come in town, okay, when they call, every member will stay out and everybody else will go in. So that's how you know who is who.
Wow.
Yeah, every member will remain out and everybody who is not member will disappear because you cannot see our masquerade. Back home we call it Junior, which is the big man, the big man, So but they changed it. The Westerners came and started telling us, instead of calling it what we knew it to be, they started calling it the devil, and that connotation made people afraid because it was not intended to make people afraid. It was just intended to say, hey, authority is in town. Because in the interior, in Bon County especially, if you did anything wrong and they call that, or Janjia, we call it, if they call it for you, man, you're in a huge trouble. It was a big thing, right? Because you don't want it. It's almost like back in the days when they say, I'm going to call a soldier, I'm going to call an army man for you. Back in the days, you call police, people will be afraid, but not afraid. But when they tell you, I'm going to the defense ministry to get a soldier for you in the 80s, that it's not, because we barely saw the soldier, right? So when they started calling the army for you, you knew it was a problem. So that's how that masquerade was in our era. When they said, I'm calling that for you, you are in big problem, and you will try to avoid it at all costs that it should not come in town for you. And once they call that, everybody who is not a member will disappear. And if it come at your house, that's a lot of things. You might be talking about buying goat, bag of rice, oil, and all kinds of things. So you don't even want it, you know. But yeah, the nomenclature they gave us and we bought into it, that's what caused some of those things to look as horrible as it sounds.
Mr. George, let me come to you. I don't know, in your research, you came across anything, you know, from the research perspective that talks about the identity or the identifying symbol that members of that particular school can kind of relate to. It's a symbol of handshake. Mr. Sapolisi talked about the mark on certain groups in Liberia. Did you come across anything to that effect?
No, I did not research the Poro and Sande Society as a word, as it is. I studied it, and my dissertation, my PhD dissertation, was on women as agent of peace during the civil conflict in Liberia and Sierra Leone. And the reason why I had to study the Poro and the Sande Society was to debunk this theory of the men being the most powerful people in a native society, and thereby women were subservient to them. Women had to respect them. So I actually was researching on the roles women play in a Sande society, and then the combination of the Sande and the Poro together. So I did not look at this identity that Mr. Sapolisi spoke about it. But I do know because my grandmother, Mam Bepelo, great grand aunt Mam Bepelo, was the Manzo of Bombing County. She was right now we call it Babulu County. She was located in Babulu. She was that at that level. And to say more of the Manzo is the highest person in the traditional society, with both male and female.
Okay, he's gonna come back. We'll get used to it. We'll get used to it. But I think he's making a point.
Yes, and that's the role. And just to buttress what he said, that's the role Swakoko played in Bon County. That's the role Swakoko played in Bon County. She was a great warrior. She was a Zoe of Bon County. And my auntie was one of the powerful, my late auntie was one of the powerful women in my town. So the reason I was shaking my head was that, yes, to disprove that theory that women were just servant. No, I mean, why they played a motherly role, but they were not just subject to men, as they want to say when it comes to societal structure, because the men cannot go, from what I know, the men cannot go into the women's society, but the women, some of the women, certain women can go into the men's society.
That was the question I was going to ask next, Mr. Sapolisi. I think you're looking at my cheat sheet. I'm looking at.
Yes.
Because the reason I know this, like I said, I grew up among the Bassa people, you know, and there were the Zoes, the head of the Zoes, the female Zoes, could actually visit or do certain visit to the men's society. Yes. But it was not the other way around.
No,
and matter of fact, if me, by accident, I was walking and came across that society, if I got in something else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So why was that? You know.
Yeah, it was powerful, you know, and it was good that Dr. George brought out, but it was very powerful. And you know, as in every society, because I know there were the Westerners or the so-called Western educated people will come and talk about. It's just that, you know, more in society today, if you broke the law, you face consequences. Okay, there are people who are in jail for doing nothing, and they're going to spend their life. Some people have been killed for doing nothing. Emma Taylor was killed and mutilated for what? According to them, whispering at the lady or whatever. He didn't do anything. It's the same with the traditional, our traditional school. Our traditional school, if you violated laws, there were consequences for it. And they were very rigid on those consequences because they did not want the next person to break the law, right? And that's how it was. So yes, the Westerners will come and tell us, oh, it was so barbaric, but these are the same people who are killing innocent people. And they're telling us our way of doing things is barbaric.
Okay, we'll bring Mr. George in when he comes back. We'll bring him in. But I want to also ask, I want to focus a little bit more on the negative connotation, right? You started talking about it. Yeah, Mr.
Before you go to Dr. Joy or go to your next part, I just wanted to ask something. I know you kind of exclude me out of it because you think I know nothing about the society, but I just want to ask a
It's a
simple
school,
question.
not a society. It is a school.
Society, the institution. We said institution.
Thank you.
But yeah, Sapolosi, I just want to ask one serious question, and you can answer this.
Mr. Positive, I know I'll be rude here. Can I just hold you there for a second?
No, but I beg you. No, I beg you. Let me finish this because Sapolosi, I can come back to you later on. Because you're not including me. I had to come from the background to bring myself in front. So please, let me just ask my one question. I can go by in my little corner. But Sapolosi, the traditions that I taught, I just want to ask a simple question: is teaching the dialect part of that thing that is taught in the school? Because one thing that is lacking in our society or that we are losing is our dialect, right? People are, even in Liberia, when I went to Monrovia, people were shocked that I came from America and I could speak Bassa. You understand? So my question to you, as part of maintaining that structure, the educational system was teaching the dialect part of it, and I can go back in my left corner.
No, don't go your corner. Just stay here, man. We want you here.
Yes,
thank you.
Yes, and that I think that's one of the things that I think too the war destroyed, because when I went back home just last 2022, in 2023 now, 2021, I think, 2021, I went to my village and spoke Pele to people, and it was English to me, and I'm telling them, look, I did not come here to speak English. I came here to speak Pele. So I think that was one of the negative in my view that the war brought, because I think people trying to westernize everything in the interior, where our traditional school was teaching you because when you went in there, you only spoke Pele, not English. But I think, and I've not gone there for years because it's been more than 20, 30 years. But the school, yes, you were teaching everything that has to do with Pele man from Baila. It has nothing to do with Monrovia. It was not teaching you how to live in Monrovia. Therefore, it was not going to teach you English. It was teaching you everything that can make you survive in Baila as a man, or in Bonkante as a man or a woman.
Wow, Mr. George, let me bring you back in. I know you were actually on a road there and you got disconnected. So let me bring you back in if you can hear us.
Yeah. So just to follow up, though, do you think if those institutions go away, our language and dialect is gone?
Your language is already going, regardless of whether the institution go or not. I just told you that I went to my home and they had one of the schools, I think 3 or 4 years ago, and I went back home 2021. I'm speaking Pele to the young people who are part of that, and they're speaking English to me. I feel offended, and I do feel offended every time I speak Pele to anybody who's supposed to be speaking Pele and speaking English to me. It makes me mad. So it is.
So we can speak Pele, man. You can teach me Pele, so we can speak Pele together. So
no, you gotta go master your Bassa first, and then you can come back. Mr. George, let me bring you in. Go ahead and end the point you were making. You were talking about the beautiful institution, and so
so I was saying that and sorry, I don't know why Mr. Dr. Positive and his company not allow me to enjoy the internet when I pay so much money for the facility.
You see, you're taking a lot of beating today, my brother.
I'm in trouble today.
So, yeah, as I was saying, that my research was just looking at the women road and the Manzo, who happens to be the one who chairs the meeting between the Poro and the Sande Society. So she's the most powerful of the Zoes, the Manzo. So I was able to debunk that philosophy that is in our mind, that women do not have authority or great power when it comes into the traditional society. But I want to come back to the point that Mr. Sapolosi made and to address what Dr. Positive is saying. Look, Dr. Positive, in the African traditional school, the only language they spoke was the local language of the people in our area. Now, this Western tradition that we invented into our country that made people taking a case from the interior to bring them to Monrovia was the one when those kids came to Monrovia, when the child came to Monrovia to live with Mr. Peter, Mr. Paul, and people of African American or different origins, and all these religious things. They've told those children that English was the proper language to speak and the local language was not a proper language to speak. And that again, as I said, one of the issues with Liberia is identity crisis. because we are fighting to make ourselves Westerners when we are not Westerners. We are Africans. We want to be Americans when we are not Americans. We are Africans, and that's the struggle we've been facing as a country for a very long time. When the late William Albert Tubber was president, he struggled to get us to even agree to have one language spoken in schools in Liberia, and at that time he was recommending Pele, so that we can learn how to speak our native language. Many of us, including myself, I don't speak any Liberian language, and I feel very insulted and very hurt that my parents did not give me the opportunity of learning a Liberian language. I go to meetings here in Europe, in America, and other places, and by the time people see me and say, "Oh, you're African, you speak more than one language," and many of them are shocked when I tell them I only speak and this kind of English that is not that proper in my mouth today, because it's diluted with being refugee in many different English-speaking countries. So, so that's our challenge. And again, it's becoming important, it's becoming imperative as we as a people, we as Liberians, to learn this cultural identity that we have, to appreciate it and love it. When Mr. Taylor was president, was it 93 or thereabout, he was the first Liberian president over several years to pass in the traditional marriage law. Now you can marry in Liberia traditionally, and it's recognized as marriage. For many years, if you marry traditionally in our country, it was not recognized because we're still struggling with the identity crisis as people, as Liberians. It was Charles Taylor who had to enact that law that made it that the law recognizes people who are together in a marriage and got married traditionally. But if you go to all our neighboring countries, whether Nigeria or Ghana, and the first wedding that people conduct is the traditional wedding, where they bring the tradition into the setting. A Ghana Nigerian, a Ghanaian, a Nigerian, a Guinean, how they call it, teach their children a local language first before the children start to learn English or learn French. I had one of my bosses when I was working in Nigeria, one of my professor and my boss. One thing he said one day, it made many people shocked, but he said it. He said, "I cannot allow my daughter to marry somebody. When we sit down on our dinner table to eat, then we have to have an interpreter." You know, it looks, how do you call it? It looks, what do you call it? Ethnically incorrect. But what he was saying is that my children had to learn how to speak the local language first before I allowed them to bring interpretation. And that takes me to the next point that Mr. Sapulusi raised, that we need to be very, 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 very mindful, very, very respectable about. It's our traditional, one of the things that Mr. Sapulusi said we learned in the traditional school was how to use our traditional herb. And for anybody listening to us who is struggling with this Western identity, there is not a single, I believe, I may be wrong, but I think about 90% of the pills you take in for headache, for malaria, for whatsoever, they are made from herbs that leaves people take and put together and turn it around and give you that white powder to do.
99%.
In our culture, in our society, we fight against this herbal medicine for many years. And you know, when the Westerners went to Ghana, to Nigeria, and were trying to remove that, the Nigerians stood against it. So today in Nigeria and in Ghana, herbal medicine and how they call it, herbal medicine and Western medicine go hand in hand. The doctors are certificated both left and right. You can go into a pharmacy in Nigeria and buy in Ghana and buy a herbal medicine in those places. Are we doing the same in Liberia? We downgrade all these people, and we have this struggle that we're going on as a people. And that's why a few years ago, when President Eden Johnson said leave, I think at the independence ceremony, Dr. Elwood Dunn, one of the renowned Liberian historians, when he said that we need to have a cultural situation where we teach our culture, where people learn our identity. The president said he put together a team to do that. I don't know whether they reached a result or not, because I've not read it in any document before, but it did not happen. But when I was in Nigeria, and I will say this today, I don't normally talk about things I do on this platform, but when I was in Nigeria, President Olusegun Obasanjo also said the same thing. He said some of the problems that Nigerians are struggling with and suffering with is because they don't know their culture. They don't know where they come from. And therefore, at every university in Nigeria, President Obasanjo
asked us to develop a curriculum called the Nigerian peoples and their culture. I was one of those who were asked to write a chapter. So if you go to Babcock University as a student today, and you have to do that first year course called Nigerian peoples and their culture, you will see a chapter written by myself that happened to talk about how Western culture have influenced an African culture and how African students have to take their culture seriously. So we need to do something like that in Liberia. We have to have our educational system from primary school to college level. We need to teach our people our culture because we don't know our Liberian culture. We don't appreciate our Liberian culture. Our children don't speak our Liberian language. Our children don't appreciate our Liberian culture. In this country, when I came to the West, and I will close with this, some of the things that was shocking were what Liberians would say. You will go to a Liberian hall and say, oh, my children, they don't eat cassava leo. The only thing they know that hamburger. In my heart, I will smile because my brain started to struggle with why a parent struggle for their children to learn how to eat the native food and the importance of those food they eat. Why a parent will be excited that the children who have African origins that belong to them don't know how to eat cassava leaf or dumbo or pamboto, but the only thing they know how to eat is this Western food that can make them sick along the line, hamburger, and they go to McDonald's and Burger King, and it becomes a big thing. So that is why I respect many Liberians in Minnesota who have opened a lot of African restaurants in Minnesota, and I hope many of us who have our children that would start helping our children to learn and appreciate the culture. And that is why when I was serving in the Northwest Independent ISD, I respected the Liberian children from Texas. Those kids went to school and they spoke the Liberian patois, not a dialect though, but they were brave enough in school to speak this Liberian patois that we speak. In the hallways, when they're speaking to each other as Liberians, they were brave enough to do that. I respected those children because they came they have started understanding that we have this certain kind of English that we speak that can be respected just as the Spanish people in Texas, whether you like them or not, whether they speak English or not. When you tell them hello in Spanish, in English, they will turn that English into Spanish. So everywhere in Texas, you have to have someone to interpret Spanish there because most of the Spanish people in the county will believe they don't speak English.
All right, so let's do this. Let's do this. I don't want to get lost on the topic. I think the reason when you were asking why is it that most parents struggle for their children to eat native food or the food they grew up eating, I think I did not have that problem in Sapalucia house. So I did not. I went to the man's house and the man's kids. I mean, they ate the food.
Every time by yourself, you don't want to have that problem. You don't cook Liberian food in your house.
I have that problem.
You do not cook Liberian food in your house.
Yeah, the man imported his wife from Asia, Asian food in here.
He doesn't even cook the Asian food. The man leave a house. We
are talking Liberian traditional school. So let us focus on Liberian.
Let's do the traditional school.
Our tradition is being eliminated by men as Sharif. Eradicated.
Steve trying to he's trying to focus on him and put it on Sharif.
Let's give him just took 5 minutes of my time. I know our 1 hour is over, but I will add additional 10 minutes there. We got to end this topic. So I want to go back and talk about something important, not that the person is trying to fight me. So
I have nothing against you. I'm fighting what Dr. George said, and then what Dr. George said. Go ahead.
But no, Mr. Sabalusi and Mr. George and Mr. Positive, I got to bring you into why is it though? I mean, when you guys were talking about women, Dr. George specifically, when he said debunk the whole idea of women being subservient to women, to the men, I was just thinking that was exactly one of the arguments that actually show up in research. That, again, parents, if you have small children with you, I'm going to talk about sexual talk here. That was one of the things that actually came about. The research shows that most of the women, when they enter those schools, they were mutilated, and that was because of sexual gratification. And because of that, they were now saying that the women were being made to be subservient to the man. Only the man can have that sexual gratification versus the woman had not sexual gratification. Now, I do not know if this is actually taking place in the school. I never went to the school. I can't speak to it, but it shows up in the research, in the Western research. And so because of that, even the United Nations, they were fighting against this whole idea, stop the female mutilation. And right now, as we speak, my friend, in some parts of the Congos, they are actually trying to reinstate the mutilation that took place. You know, there's a whole name out there. I can say the name here, but I want to be politically correct. But they are going back and reattaching parts that were removed. And so here it is. That actually shows as this is one of the reasons that they were saying women were subservient, they had no choice in the matter. And so how do we debunk this if this was something that was researched?
So the research depends on who were interviewed and under what circumstances. For me, from what I know and from my experience, the women that I know from our end, I have not heard from them their perspective when it comes to saying, "Oh, because this was taken from me, I do not enjoy, I do not enjoy sex." Right? I have not gotten that. But when people are doing research and they already have an underlying motive, they already have drawn a conclusion prior to the studies going on. You and I know most of the time the studies that are done in our setting in Africa, especially in Liberia and other places, is not done from the horse's mouth. It is somebody speaking on behalf of another person, realistically. Because I know most of the time when they do their studies, the white guys sitting in the car is the too bossy to go get there and ask the actual people on the ground. And they go and send one guy to gain small money. He goes there, he say, "Hey, what is this and what is that?" Whatever they tell you, he come and misinterpret to whoever doing the study, and they bring your data and compile it and send it to the United Nations. What motive was there? You know. Now, what I think, this is just my opinion. It has nothing to do with whether their studies were right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can symbolize some of those things that have to do with that based on the health nature of it. Because I know from healthcare, and we can make science and African science together, and we can meet in the middle and refine it to benefit us as a people. We know the tools that they use were not sterile, which we know it also had negative impact on those that they use it on. So we can have those people who are in charge of the thorough school sit down and let us have a discussion, or the science school and have a discussion. You say, look, for XYZ reason, benefit to the person who you're doing it to, and to the benefit of our community, instead of using this tool to do this, why not symbolize it? Let's take, for example, let us look at what the Christians did in their religion. Instead of everybody going on the cross to die, what did they do? They baptized, symbolizing their death to the cross or to Christ. We can do similar thing. It don't have to be done the way it's been done, just so to promote health, in my opinion. Instead of putting the marks on the people, they use different means, right? Because we know the health impact it will have, the negative health impact it will have on the individual themselves. I think those are discussions that we should be having instead of just saying, "Oh, this is horrible, this is whatever," and whatever you want to talk about. Tattoo are on people's skin here. We see people putting tattoo all on their skin. I as a Liberian, I don't think I should put tattoo on my skin because I feel it's not safe, in my opinion. But the white man or whoever is doing it see that it's a good thing for them, and they got tattoo all on their skin, including their faces, right? So should I say it is? Should I give any kind of negative connotation to it because I don't believe in it?
But I think answer your question, because there's supervision of those things. They are licensed to provide it, and they can actually get visited by the State Department, by the county anytime.
Yeah.
To make sure that the equipment they use is sterilized. So I think you made the point earlier.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that we can sit and discuss it, those that are involved, and see whether we can find a safer way to do it and a better way to do it. And in my opinion, I think we should have a symbol that represents that instead of doing whatever that is being currently practiced. That's just my opinion.
Mr. George, and then we'll go to Mr. Paulson and we'll try to wrap this thing up.
Yeah, Mr. Sapolosi, In the last couple of years, I have been working with my company, Focus, as a
You know,
as a
Mr.
consult-
Josh, I'm going to charge you $250. I'm not here to promote your
okay.
company, sir.
As a consultant working in the field of behavior analysis and behavior corrections. Um, Dr. Sharif and Dr. Positive, in the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s in this United States, there's a place here in Maryland, not too far from where I live, right where I am right now. I'm currently in Emmitsburg, Maryland, where they used to kill people every day in this country, kill them every day because one pastor said they have witchcraft, and these people are having something they call mental health issues. Today, millions of dollars, billions of dollars is being placed. Every state healthcare system in this country, money, money is being put in place for people like me to help those people live what we call a fulfilling life. When you don't understand something, it's good to take time to research it. And if you research it, it also takes time for you to find a solution. That's why the word is called research. My professor used to tell me research means to go and search again to find out whether there is something new you can do. So when it comes to this issue of the FGM, the female genital
Mutilation. If that guy go off again, I'm not bringing him back. You better say, Mr. George.
Don't say that. Hello, am I okay? Are you guys hearing me?
I'm
Not
hearing
yet.
you, but now you okay, go ahead.
Mm.
Okay, you gotta log off and come back in. Mr. Positive, go. Mr. George, your background noise is really bad.
He's not even
Yeah,
connected.
someone was calling me, so that phone call was. Is it okay now?
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
much
go ahead.
Am I much better? Okay, good. So FGM may not be the proper way to go, but do we throw the baby and the bath bucket away, or do we sit down and speak as President Ellen Johnson said he did in Liberia? You can have the cultural things, we can practice our cultural thing, but let us take away those elements that seem not to be positive, those elements that seems to be negative. When we remove those elements, we can continue to work on our culture. So we cannot throw the whole Sande society and the activities of the Sande society away because of FGM. We can continue to maintain what is practiced in our society and try to remove the FGM from there. Again, the whole research on FGM, I know my feminist friend, they normally attack me when I say this, but I'm going to say it again. The whole research on FGM is still controversial. There are some African female researchers who said, no, it's a health reason. In fact, it did not even start it's not only in Africa that FGM takes place.
No,
It also takes place in other parts of the world.
yeah.
So there are research that say on the one hand is because of health reason, the same way how the penis of a man is the head is removed at birth. It perhaps is the same health reason in some research that said it needed for the female. But since the research is inconclusive, it is always important for us to take that which is right. Since the WHO says so, we can work towards working with this native group like we do in any school where we have to change syllables every 5 years, where we have to look at the syllables and rearrange our curriculum every 5 years. We can do that in the Sandy Bush schools as President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf did. And I think since President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, they have stopped the FGM situation in the Sandy and the Sandy school in Liberia. It is no longer acceptable because it is against the Liberian law. So that argument, Mr. Sheriff, is mute right now because the law is against it, and most of the schools in Liberia knows that it is wrong and they are not practicing it. So therefore, we can go back to encourage ourselves to learn our tradition, to respect to learn who we are as a people, stop struggling from the identity crisis that we struggle with, and accept ourselves for who we are. My name is Emmanuel George. I'm a Liberian. There is nothing in my name, in my first two names, that I associate myself with my country. Emmanuel is a Hebrew name, which means God is with us. George is a British name, which means the farmer. I'm not a farmer, nor do I carry God and put him among people everywhere I go. But it's a name, it's a name, it's a name I have to bear that come from two countries that I don't associate with, I don't have a serious affiliation with. It is now time for us as Africans, as Liberians, to accept our culture. When I started having children, none of my children carry Western name. The only Western name they have is the George name because it's my family name. But my daughter name is Akuron Musukula. My son is Gaje Oluwa Kayode. They all they all carry African names so they can identify. They can always know where they come from, where's the identity, where they are. It was a conscious decision I made when I started to. I did not, and I'm not forcing it on anybody. As a Liberian, I did not start appreciating African culture until I became a refugee in Cote d'Ivoire, in Ghana, and in Nigeria. It was in those countries I started to appreciate what it means to be an African.
Okay, gentlemen. So just stay tuned. I have a call on the line here. Sir, if you can just lower your radio, you can just lower your radio. I'm going to bring you on so you can ask your question. You can lower the radio speaker real quick. So go ahead, sir, with your question. Just announce your name and just post your question.
Yeah, my question is, my name is Orlando. My question is, I just want to find out from Sabalucio, because I've been posting questions. I'm thinking that you guys also seen it, but that means Sabalucio page. Okay, one of my questions is, can Imada actually tell us what is the reason of which female clitoris is being cut in a Poro society? That's one question. And before I let Imada respond to that, I also want to address the issue of cultural identity. You know, we, most especially Liberians all over the world, we have problems. Even in public gatherings, when you are speaking your dialect, you know, people feel that you are inferior. You know nothing. But it's a problem that we have, we Liberians. That's why our culture and dialects are going that way. Most of the nationalities in the entire world, more especially in America, the Chinese, they teach their children how to speak Chinese. The Hispanic, the same thing. Most of these countries, they teach their children how to speak their language. But the problem is with us Liberians. That's the problem we have. We feel that we are westernized, so anytime we go among public, even in our very houses, people don't teach their children dialect. They don't teach their children culture. So that's the reason of which our culture and dialects are going away. Imara, can you respond to that question? Why is it that clitoris is being cut in a poor society? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the question. And I think, gentlemen, you guys just addressed the question, but I think he was on the line with me. He probably did not hear. So, I mean, again, his question, it comes to the topic that we just discussed, the mutilation that takes place. In a Sande society, I know he kept saying Poro, but Sande society. So, his question to the panel is, why is that taking place? I don't know if any of us here can tell you why that is taking place. Well, we know that took place. So, Mr. Sapolisi, I don't know if you want to address it for us. He posted to you.
So I know when we started, I said I'm not an expert on this. I was giving you my personal experience. Now I don't know what prompted those that started this to start doing it, but I think in my last assertion I said I would think we should go back to the drawing board and stop those things, get those parties involved, and those things that are causing health issues, we should refrain from it. And Dr. George came and said, I think earlier he said we already stopped that. So why they started, I don't know. But one thing I can say, based on health reason and facts that I know regarding health issues and the process they were using, I thought it would be a best decision to symbolize those behavior instead of continuing the process. But I really don't know what the process, why they started.
Yeah, and I will bring Mr. Positive in, and I would like to go to one of our classmates listening from Liberia, Mr. Richard Colley. He made a very good point here. I would like to go into his comment and read some of that. But Mr. Positive, go ahead.
Yeah, so the first thing, science is invention and research done by men, right?
Sabolisa would disagree, but go ahead.
And our traditional folks, right? Our educational folks, the folks in the Poro society or Sande society, right? They came up with this thing for the FGM. I think even if we decide to change it, it will be important for historical purposes to know why, right? Why was that decision made to do that? And I think to answer the caller question, since Apolosia said he doesn't know, we have it behooves us Liberians to find out, to know the reason why that was done, because it could have been a decision that was made based on something that was happening amongst the elders or people who decided to make that decision. You understand? So, like how they decided to give us injection for vaccine and all these things, somewhere in our traditional history, people decided to do that. And I think it's something that we should find out, or somebody should come up with an answer if people are willing to tell the secret, because the institution are based on secret. So if that's something that somebody will be willing to tell, then we will definitely know. But if they're not willing to share it, then we'll not find out. Right?
You know, it's only a secret to you because you're not part of the school. That's all. But you know, I'm not going to put my mouth on you again. You already deal with me already. But you know, I'll tell you what, gentlemen. You know, this is really taking place. This is a big discussion, right? So right now, there's a whole study. There's a whole thing called, you know, again, I want to talk to our parents. If you have small children around, pregnant may not be appropriate for your children. But you know, there's a plastic surgery out there called clitoroplasty, right? Where they are reattaching the clitoris. You know, this is taking place at the Cleveland Clinic. It's taking place in America. So apparently some of our Africans have come back to this country. They have gone through that process and they're like, you know what? I want this thing back. Because the one thing that, you know, the study actually show is that the pleasure piece of that for the female was taken away, you know, sexually, you know, that would be the one that gave them that sexual pleasure. And because that was taken away, now most females are fighting back and they say, give it back to me, you know, my body. And so these surgeries are taking place even here in the United States of America. You know, the Cleveland Clinic is one of those places the surgery is taking place. And you have some doctors, international doctors traveling to Africa and doing the surgery and reattaching these body parts. And so it is a big thing. We do not know why it was removed, but just based on the study, based on the research, it seemed as though that was, you know, because of the sexuality, to try to make the woman not to get too sexually active. I don't know. I couldn't get you all of that. But that is the one thing. But Dr. George, I want to bring this question to you from our friend here who joined us from Liberia. He's talking about the school. He said, we talk about the traditional established by our people.
Why they read? Because
yeah, Mr. George, just mute yourself. It was meant to teach our people discipline. I think I just like that piece of it, the discipline. Emmanuel alluded to that earlier. And also prepare you for future challenges. It teaches you traditional life, how to prepare basket, how to fish. But the point I want to kind of settle on here is how to settle dispute. I think that's a big thing. You know, I really want us to look at Richard's comment here, how to settle dispute. Because, you know, again, growing up in the village, what I saw in this village, when something happened in the villages, you know, back then, I used to see that, you know, in that palava hut, under that palava hut, you would have the elders, they would call the people, and they would sit down and settle those disputes. Right now, Mr. Positive and myself cannot even settle dispute without putting each other on Facebook. So what is missing there, Mr. George? Let's talk about our dispute resolution piece of.
Yeah, that's why when the TRC was formed in Liberia and also in how they call it in Rwanda. In Liberia, we talk about the Palava hot way of solving situation of cases, and then in Rwanda we talk about the Kichacha courts because they were African traditional way of solving issues. Again, as I've been saying over and over, Liberia, and perhaps at a level Sierra Leone, we have these two countries in West Africa that struggle from identity crisis. And so our culture, things that we used to practice, we put it away. Many of us have become westernized, we have become individualized. Our way of life have become totally outside of the community way of life that we have had. And I agree with the viewer that, yeah, it's true. We need to bring some of these things, our dispute management in the African system. It worked. It was positive. In fact, people would talk for hours and it would solve problems just by talking. And you know, those of us who work in the West in different areas, the counselor and other human health sciences area, you know that by allowing people to talk, you help them to vent out what they have within them. It releases stress, it releases depression, and then you walk them into solving the problems. And that's why all this palaver heart situation was all about. But coming to the point of the quarter, now there are two schools of thoughts on why this was introduced. One school, and there are research, you can Google on what I'm saying, you can Google it right now on your computer, those two will come out. One is those who says that the African kings, the chiefs, because they have 13, 14 wives, they didn't want their wives to sleep with other people, so they mutilated them so that they would not experience the sexual pleasure. That's why it's in the research. But can we question that research? I think if we read it, we can question it, because there are many African chiefs who children had sex with their wives and they had children by them. So that is one school. The second school is because of our health reason, just as we remove the full head of the penis of the male child. Some people think it is health reason. I agree with Dr. Positive and Mr. Sapolusi. This is something we need to research on. Unfortunately, our people have not become that open. Only once in a while you meet people who are open. Even our brother Sapolusi, who has a master's degree, he's here. He finds it difficult to say certain things because if he is a secret in that society. So we don't have votes. We don't have things written. When we speak to the females who have been from it, most of the females who are loyal to the Sande Society, none of them will tell you that it is because of sexual hierarchy. None of them. Most of the people, I mean, a good majority, let me not say none, a good majority, most of those who seem to be in the forefront of this FGM issue, they are other advocates, or they are people who came to the West and needed to get papers. So definitely they had to post something on their asylum paper that will encourage them to receive the documents they have. So until we start speaking, until the women in that have experienced this, who are on the African continent, those who are doing it, until they start to tell all the story as to why they do it, it will take us a while to reach up to them, but we are close to it because we have more information on the Sande and Poro Society than any time in our history.
All right. So, gentlemen, it's been a blast to have this conversation. I wish we'll just keep going and going. I mean, it turned out to be a wonderful discussion. I think the engagement is great. I think it's the first time in a long time we've gone over an hour. So I'd like to close. I'd like for you guys to just kind of give your closing remarks. Mr. Sapolusi, you can just give us the reason why we should all go back. And Mr. George, you can take it from the traditional point. Mr. Positive, you can just, put your mouth on me all day. So we can just kind of go from there. So, yeah. So let me start with Mr. George, and I will come to Mr. Positive, and Sapolusi will take us home. Mr. George, your closing remarks. You got a minute.
Yeah, I will take less than a minute. First of all, I want to thank you all for bringing up the discussion and the callers who participated in the discussion. But one thing that is clear, one thing that is true, one thing that is fact for every one of us is that as Africans, Liberians, we need to take our cultural identity seriously. Until we start that, the rise of Liberia will still be clouded because we won't know which direction we're going in. People who do not know where they're from will never know where they are going. You have to understand where you're from before you can clearly understand where you want to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George and Mr. Positive. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, again, thank you to all of you for participating on the show. And I just want to say, a great topic, to fellow Liberians, I want to say, our tradition is important. Things that are good about our tradition, we can try to bring it back and embed it into our school system, because the future we seek, we cannot leave our tradition behind. So I want to end on this note that those that are in policy making, try to find a way to include some of our traditional education into our school system, so that our young people today can know what our ancestors did in the past. And on that note, I want to say thank you to all our panelists, and you guys have a great day.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Positive. And Mr. Sapolusi. Go ahead, sir.
So I want to say again, I would join my colleagues in saying thanks to all those who participated. To end on this note, I want to say, if Liberia shall rise, we have to rise with our culture. Anything short of that Liberia will rise and fall, not knowing where we are going, because we'll just rise and fall like anything else. But the Poro and Sande Society is a good school and it's a good institution. It needs to be reinforced. We need to teach it to our people so that our future is not lost. Let us start appreciating what we have, because what we have is a very rich culture that we have been brainwashed to let go. But it is time that we recognize these mistakes that we have made and now correct them. As we go forward, let's forge on promoting our culture values everywhere we go. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mr. Sapalucia. All right, to all of our viewers, those who actually join us, and those who call, we say thank you. Those who actually commented on Facebook, we say thank you for joining us. This is how we are going to end today's table talk discussion. Next week on this platform, we will be having a special guest, and our segment then is going to be This Could Be You. It is a segment where we bring professionals from Liberia or different parts of the world in the diaspora who will come here and tell us their story, how they came from war-torn country Liberia to becoming some of the best people's greatest minds in the world. So join us next week when we will be here with another edition of This Could Be You, and Mr. George is going to be here conducting a special interview. Thank you for being part of the discussion today. God bless you. You guys stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you next week.